Um, Leslie agreed to join us today for the Privacy Exchange Community Show and Tell series, and I am super excited. She's got a lot of experience to share with us. Leslie works as a manager of risk and compliance at LucidWorks, where she oversees compliance programs, risk management, and AI governance, all while collaborating with sales, customer service teams, security teams on the due diligence process for security-related questions and reporting. She holds certificates like a CISM, a CIP-E, and she has over 20 years of experience across various industries and brings that experience to her role in information security and risk. So for the next 25 minutes or so that we've got with Leslie, we'll spend it in this way. We'll first do a Q&A session with me and Leslie for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. We will record the session that I'll be doing, but then we'll go ahead and turn off the recording so you can ask any type of question you want freely. I do want to just mention that the information we share today is just for general information and educational purposes only, and none of this is legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer, I don't think, unless you're a secret lawyer, and it wouldn't be good for you anyway, but just to be very, very clear, not legal advice. So with all those formalities behind us, Leslie, are you ready to hop in?
I am ready to be in the hot seat today.
Sounds good. So my first question for you is, so you work in risk and compliance and you interact with buyers and sellers on your own team during the sales process for things like security questionnaires and due diligence. I'm curious what kind of common themes that you've seen in that work and any suggestions you have to make the sales process and the security reviews a smoother process for folks.
Yeah, I have a lot of ideas around this and have been doing this for multiple years. And so it's been a trajectory of kind of improving our process. But I think overall, when it comes down to it, when you are trying to get a deal done and you're going through the due diligence process, like I know because I work in security and compliance for my team that we do the same for our vendors that we're looking at. And they really are doing the same for us because they want to be confident that when they're making a purchase that they know that their data is protected, that their customers' data is protected, that bringing in another vendor is a very serious decision on behalf of that business. And, they want to take care of their own clients. So even though I will admit it is not always the most fun part of my job, you tend to see with a lot of these vendors that the questions are very similar from client to client or customer to customer. And you see the same variety of questions over time because they're trying to get an idea about your security program, about your privacy program in general, how you approach things, how you're going to protect their data, what's going to happen if there is like a breach or an issue, how would you respond to that and work with them, all the standard questions that you see. So over time, some of the things that I've found really helpful is you cannot determine like as a business and to your leadership how much time you're spending on this and how much time your different teams are putting into it until you start actually managing what you're doing. So if I had any advice to other team members, I think it's that Peter Drucker quote that he's like, what gets measured gets managed. And I've heard that he actually didn't say that quote, but that's who it's always attributed to. But one of the very first things that we started doing on our team is really documenting every request of this nature that we got. So I always keep track of how many, let's say like RFP, RFI questionnaires that we get, how many follow-ups as part of those questionnaires that we get, any vendor like annual risk reviews that we get on behalf of our clients, as well as, contract reviews for security or privacy of that nature. And once we started tracking over time how many that we were getting on a quarterly basis, for example, and how long we were spending, if that's something that you're willing to do to, track your time as you're filling these in, then you can really quantify like to your leadership as well if you need additional assistance, like, hey, did you know that we are getting let's say 20 to 30 of these questionnaires, which is kind of our average for LucidWorks every quarter. And this is how much time we're spending on it. And so then you can justify, in the future, perhaps other purchases that you might want to make with regard to this, or additional staff that you might need if it's taking a long time. It's really all about kind of quantifying, how often you're doing this, what information do you need, what other teams need to be involved to really make it most productive overall, I think, at your org.
I really love that idea of measuring it and tracking your time, because what I immediately thought of when you said that was like how not only time on the security side, but the time that equates to on the sales side. So how much, additional time are you adding to a sales process if you had the staffing that you needed or the tools that could help accelerate that? So I feel like that would be a very compelling data point to share with leadership to get those, running fast or getting the type of resources that you need. That's an excellent point, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned teamwork, and I'm sure there's a lot of handoffs in the security questionnaire world too, not only from the sales team, the customer, but other teams. I know you have a perspective on how to make teams work better together. The phrase teamwork makes the dream work. So my question to you is, when it comes to security, to compliance, privacy, and legal, how do you make sure that you're all on the same page and sharing the right information so that you get the job done in the most efficient, best process kind of a way?
Yeah. I think the first part of it, thinking back, like when we were talking about multiple teams are typically involved in this process, because I know, for us personally, we have a very, complicated product. There are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot involved from a sales engineering perspective. There's a lot involved from the legal perspective, even down to, what is that client's hosting situation? Are they hosting it themselves? Are we hosting it for them? That changes a lot of the answers that we might be approaching this type of survey from. So you do need a lot of different teams involved. And, for us, I work a lot with our sales engineering teams. And one of the things that we've done to make it easier on ourselves is we keep every response that we've ever sent to a client on behalf of these questionnaires, because like I was saying earlier, you tend to get the same questions over and over, and you don't want to be reinventing the wheel each time and trying to answer the same questions each time from in your head. So one of the things that I found really helpful is and you can just start out at whatever level works for you. Like we have in our drive a folder where every time we get a questionnaire, I will put that questionnaire in the folder as we first received it and then as we sent it back and what our answers were. And we've created a common database for all different areas of security, compliance, privacy, legal. There's often financial questions especially if you're publicly traded, they want to know information about your finances for FCPA and other things. And so we have that all located within one folder structure. And then that's allowed us as well to have these answers and to populate other tools that we might use in the future. Let's say using AI to answer questions for us, or we're experimenting right now. We have our own GPT that we've created within our own environment, where we've fed it all of those answers, all of our policies and procedures, and someone can go ask a question to that chatbot and see, what is the proposed answer. So part of that is kind of gathering all of that information from those various teams and having it located in one central place where they can reference it, is a big part of it.
Oh, that is fascinating. So I'm curious, with this chatbot that you created, or like just this LLM that you created, do you use that internally, or did you give that to like your internal customers, like your sales engineers, or how does that work?
Yeah, we have actually a couple different versions of that. So we have an internal version that we have been testing, just our security and compliance team at first. So we, kind of rolled out in small doses, if you will. So we have tested our own. I also know that our sales team has an RFP specific tool that they've developed that is more like sales related answers for, engineering related functions like product functions, things like that, that aren't necessarily security related, but that always come up in questionnaires like, can you do this function, or do you have access to this capability, those types of things. So we have different tools. I think, there are a lot of vendors as well that merge that functionality. So they might have an offering within their platform where they offer that as, part of their trust center functionality or something like that. So, there are a variety of tools out there that can do this type of thing, or you can develop your own in-house if you would like to. So we do both at LucidWorks, at least at the moment.
That is so cool that you even had the data ready to go for your
Yeah.
internal one that you can even do that. Super cool. Thanks for sharing your experience. I have one last question before we kick it off to Q&A from the audience. So I know you've mentioned before that you've pivoted to your security and compliance career a little bit later in life. And I feel like this is such an important topic, especially because in the privacy world, in particular, there's a lot of change happening. Like we see a number of people moving from privacy into AI governance. I know you do a little bit of that in your role as well. So many of us are basically faced with a pivot ahead of us. And I'm curious what led you to make that decision? And then what advice would you give to someone who's considering making a bold career change?
Yeah, yeah. So I've had many career pivots in my life. I think I'm a little bit unusual in that I never I never was one of those people that was always like, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. Like I kind of went into school thinking that I wanted to go one direction, and then I ended up going a completely different direction. So I've done probably 3 to 4 pivots over time. And it's very interesting. One of my pivots, I worked in marketing for a while, and I actually had the opportunity to work for a couple of career coaches. So I learned a lot through working for them, like setting up their marketing campaigns and their structure on people that were interested in career pivots and who were career pivoting later in life. And I think, one of the things that they taught me is really thinking about, particularly with our roles, like how do you want to spend your time every day? I think there are misconceptions about certain roles, especially when it comes to security and compliance and privacy, on people think like, oh, it would be really cool to do this role, and they get like all gung-ho about, I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to take this class or something, when they really don't know what the day-to-day of the role is like. So a big thing that I always tell people is, think about your own strengths and weaknesses that you have as an individual. Think about, what lights you up inside, or how do you like to spend your time on a daily basis. Like if you are a people person and you really enjoy like interacting with people, maybe you don't want to be, somebody who is just doing like pen testing all day or something like that, where your head's down, focused on your task, but you might not have a lot of interaction. Because it's also about, your personality fit, your culture fit in these roles. And if I've learned anything from the career coaches that I worked with, it's that you don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, I need to find my ultimate passion right now. Like this has to be the most important thing in my life. It has to be a combination of like, what are your passions, but also what works for you financially, what works for you, in a work situation. Like, do you like to work from home? Do you want to work in the office? You have to pull in all of those factors. And then don't be afraid to reach out to other people and to just ask them, hey, can I have an informational interview with you? Can I ask you a few questions to figure out, like, how do you spend your day? What do you like about your current role? What do you not like? If you were giving advice to someone who is first starting, what advice would you give? And I've met just so many people that have helped me in that way over time, especially transitioning into this role, about other areas of compliance that I didn't know a lot about, that they've given me advice. Like, for example, I know we have some lawyers and everything in our group that I've been like, I've thought about going to law school. Do you think I should do that? And often the answer I get is no, like, hell no, don't go to law But just advice that they have because they have such a broad, wide perspective from working in that area for such a long time. And so they can give you the real like nitty gritty, if you will, of the day to day of that role where you can determine then is that something that you even are interested in going into? And then if you've tried something for a while, like on a smaller basis, and you've decided like, yes, I am interested in that, then maybe move forward and pay for like a training class or a program or something like that. But you don't need to jump in like right away and just do like 100% pivot. It can be slow, like in little chunks over time. You have to have a plan for doing that. That's probably like my base advice that I would give.
Yeah, I really love you focusing on the informational interview because that really gives a glimpse into the reality of the jobs. And like you said, you know, sometimes it looks like a dream from the outside, but once you get in there, you're like, whoa, like this does not align with like, I'm not good with TDS XYZ or like I love TDS XYZ, and just to really get a sense of the career before you go all in and spend a bunch of money on certifications or whatever. I love that advice. One thing, and before we open it up to Q&A, one thing I also really love about you, Leslie, is that you are very curious and you're always growing and expanding. And I just want to give a plug for a resource you've recently shared with the Privacy Exchange community members, your podcast list. So I know you listen and learn a lot. So Brian, if you've got that list, if you could please share that. And thank you again, Leslie, for sharing your knowledge. And if anyone's interested in getting into like a security and compliance role, check out the list of podcasts that Leslie has assembled. All right, so that's that. Let's turn off the recording now and open it up to audience Q&A. So feel free to either come off mute or you